A truck driver gives a ride to a nun on the highway, and you won't believe how she decides to thank him. The road has always been full of surprises. Every mile hides the unexpected, and you never truly know who you can rely on when you choose to give someone a lift. When Marco spots a nun hitchhiking in an unlikely spot, his first instinct is to drive past, but his generous heart ultimately wins out. He couldn't have imagined how this nun would repay his kindness. Marco is a seasoned driver with over 20 years of experience. Despite the ups and downs life has thrown at him, no challenge has been as daunting as the one he's facing now. The truck he drives is far from reliable, an old, worn-out vehicle that makes it hard to secure well-paying transport jobs. His earnings barely cover daily expenses and the needs of his family. Traveling such long distances comes with additional costs, forcing Marco to set aside a significant portion of his income for any emergencies that might arise on the road. Maintaining financial stability has become a constant struggle for him. Every morning at 4 a.m., Marco wakes up, ready for another long day on the highway, driving until darkness falls. Many wonder why he avoids driving at night, but he keeps his reasons private. There are secrets he guards closely, memories he doesn't want to stir. The truth is, his current struggles with renting the truck and his financial hardships are tied to a past trauma, a night he wishes he could erase from his memory. 2 years earlier, Marco experienced the worst accident of his career. It was a period of intense work with good earnings when the opportunity arose to transport a large load with a colleague. The pay was tempting, and the sooner they completed the trip, the sooner they could return to their families. The trouble started when his colleague decided to load far more hay bales onto the truck than the safety limits allowed. Even though Marco could tell the truck was heavier than usual, he ignored his doubts at the time. Eager to get home quickly, he decided to take a shortcut through the mountains, skipping rest stops and meals to save time. Marco and his colleague took turns driving every 5 hours to avoid exhaustion and reduce the risk of falling asleep at the wheel. However, on one particularly dark night, fatigue overtook them both. Marco remembered how heavy his eyelids felt, to the point that he began to dream while still holding the steering wheel. The darkness and silence of the road wrapped around him as he struggled to keep his eyes open. After a few brief and dangerous moments of dozing off, the blinding headlights of an oncoming truck jolted Marco awake. Despite his desperate attempts to react, the collision was inevitable. The world around him spun in a chaotic blur. The most vivid memory Marco held onto was seeing his friend thrown out of the truck's window. The accident completely shattered him. Everything he had built up to that moment now hung by a thread. The destroyed truck was just the beginning of a long and painful recovery, both physical and emotional. The journey back to normalcy was grueling and full of challenges. Marco spent all his savings and had to rebuild his life from scratch, facing trauma and haunting memories along the way. Driving at night became a taboo he swore never to break again. One morning, an event occurred that would become the most unusual episode in Marco's life. As usual, he woke up at 4 a.m. and started his truck's engine. After sipping his morning coffee, he waited for the sky to brighten, watching the first rays of sunlight pierce the horizon before heading out toward the next town. Everything seemed to be going smoothly on that peaceful morning, until he encountered an unexpected sight. Driving along a stretch of road well known to truckers, Marco noticed a nun standing at the side of the highway, waiting for a ride. This area, often frequented by women working the night shift, was the last place one would expect to see a nun. A chill ran down his spine, as if the presence of the religious figure was some kind of omen. Marco was tempted to ignore her and continue on his way, but just then, the radio announced that the day was going to be extremely hot in that region. He hesitated. Realizing he couldn't ignore the chance to offer her a ride, Marco pulled over and nervously asked where she needed to go. The nun explained she was heading to a farm about an hour away, a direction that coincidentally aligned with his route. Marco quickly cleared the passenger seat of newspapers and his lunchbox, inviting her to get in. With the truck back on the road, Marco broke the silence that had settled between them, driven by a question weighing on his mind. "Do you know the women who work along this stretch of road? The ones who work at night?" The nun's response struck him like lightning. "Yes, I was working with them." Her revelation left Marco speechless, too stunned to ask more questions. He glanced at her, noticing her youthful appearance, extraordinary beauty, and unshakable calm. Remaining silent for the rest of the journey, Marco reflected on how complex and unpredictable life could be. Finally, the nun introduced herself, saying her name was Beatrice. As the truck wound its way along the road, Beatrice remarked that it was God who had sent Marco to rescue her. She explained how many truckers had passed by without stopping after her night shift, too afraid to be seen in such a place. She admitted she had nearly lost hope, desperate to get back to her family, who had no idea about her nighttime work. Beatrice expressed her growing fear of rising violence in the area and the danger she faced. Marco felt a surge of indignation. How could a nun openly admit to working in such a sinful environment? Before he could dwell further on his thoughts, the situation took a dramatic turn. Ahead of them appeared armed men staging an ambush. Forced to stop, the masked assailants robbed Marco of all the money he had, despite Beatrice's heartfelt pleas for mercy. The truck driver was overwhelmed with tension and fear. Years of hard work seemed to disappear in an instant. Left without a cent, Marco faced the bleak reality of returning home empty-handed, unable to cover his family's daily expenses or meet his financial obligations. As he restarted the truck, a wave of injustice washed over him. "It's not fair. I work so hard, and these bandits take everything," Marco whispered, his heart heavy with the cruelty he had just encountered. Beatrice's comforting words were kind, but could not ease Marco's worries about feeding his children. Despite his emotional turmoil, he stayed true to his promise to take Beatrice to her destination. They arrived at a sprawling farm, vibrant with orchards, vast fields of crops, and animals grazing across the land. Though burdened by his troubles, Marco ensured Beatrice reached her destination safely. Upon their arrival, Beatrice revealed that the farm belonged to her family and that her father was a wealthy landowner. Sensing Marco's distress, she insisted he stay at their home to rest and recover from the trauma. At first, Marco hesitated, but the situation shifted when the police arrived to investigate the ambush. Concerned for his safety, Marco agreed to remain. The hospitality Marco experienced in Beatrice's home was extraordinary, akin to staying in a five-star hotel. He enjoyed delicious meals and nights of restful sleep he hadn't known in years. Each day, Marco called his wife, sharing his worries about the challenges ahead, including the need to secure new loans to rent another truck. Meanwhile, Marco noticed Beatrice's strange behavior. Every night, she would sneak out and hitchhike in the same area where he had picked her up. Although tempted to bring this up with her family, Marco chose not to probe further. Grateful for their unwavering generosity, he kept his concerns about Beatrice's actions to himself, not wanting to disrupt the harmony or jeopardize the kindness they had extended to him. It was late at night when the silence in Marco's room was broken by a soft knock at the door. The figure waiting on the other side was unexpected. The nun, her hair down, barefoot, and dressed in pajamas that seemed unconventional for her role. With a discreet yet determined gesture, she beckoned him to follow. Surprised and confused, Marco followed her through the silent hallways of the house to a small storage room. Along the way, words slipped out of his mouth almost involuntarily. "I don't understand how a nun can do what you do." Calmly, she replied, "Even though I'm on a break from my ecclesiastical duties, I have devoted my life to serving others." Reaching a room on the far side of the house, the nun opened the door, revealing an unexpected scene: a young woman, Elena, holding a newborn baby in her arms. "I met Elena during an evangelical mission in the area where you once gave me a ride. I went there every day, and during that time she gave birth to her child," the nun explained. Marco was stunned by the scene, so far removed from what he had imagined. At that moment, the nun shared the weight of the secret she had kept. "Thank you for not mentioning this to your family. I had to convince my father to take her and the baby in." Marco felt a wave of shame for his hasty judgments. Elena and the baby would have a safe haven with them until the church could arrange a fresh start for them. The nun's story, filled with compassion and dedication, deeply moved Marco, making him reflect on all the prejudices he had held before learning the truth. He felt the weight of his late understanding and the importance of an open mind resonate deeply within him. The next morning, as Marco prepared to leave, he immediately noticed that his truck felt unusually heavy. Curious, he decided to investigate the cause. That's when the nun suggested he open the cargo hold. To his astonishment, Marco discovered it filled with sacks of grain, fresh fruits, vegetables, and salted meat. Overcome with emotion, tears streamed down his face as he asked, still incredulous, "What's happening?" "My son will have enough food for a long time," he exclaimed, his voice trembling with gratitude. He embraced the nun and her family, overwhelmed by a profound sense of thankfulness. Then, shaking the young woman's father's hand, Marco was handed a receipt and an address. "Not all of this is for you," the father said with a solemn tone and a look of mixed gratitude and mystery. "This load must be delivered to a specific address in your city, to a friend who is a merchant," he added, revealing the details of the mysterious cargo in the truck. With a sense of relief and determination, Marco set off to complete the delivery as instructed. He felt the weight of responsibility lift, as though guided by a kind of divine providence. As he drove the roads toward home, he reflected on how this delivery might affect his life and the lives of others, fully aware of the profound impact it was about to have. Upon returning to his hometown, Marco was greeted with joyful celebrations from his family and neighbors, all thrilled by his safe return and the success of his journey. Amidst the festivities, however, Marco felt the need to share the generosity he had received. Remembering the surplus cargo entrusted to him, he decided to donate part of it to local charities and community centers, spreading acts of solidarity and kindness within his community. Reflecting on recent events, Marco realized how his initial misjudgment of the nun's intentions had been overturned by a larger, unseen plan guided by fate and goodwill. He found himself contemplating the nun's words, convinced that perhaps divine intervention had orchestrated their encounter on that fateful day. Did you enjoy this story? Have you ever experienced similar moments in your life? What helped you get through them? What was your anchor during those challenging times? Share your experiences in the comments. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Remember, sometimes it's the smallest acts that make the biggest difference. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.